What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the greatest series on the internet, Forgotten Dawgs, where we will be shining a little bit of light on some NBA role players that I don't think get enough credit. Today's player that we're going to be talking about is Rashard Lewis. Now, there's something about Rashard Lewis that I've always thought he was like the greatest NBA player ever. A few years ago in 2K, I grinded out to get one of his 99 overall cards in my team, and then he kind of just sucked. And to me, he was just the greatest player ever, and that stemmed from watching the 2012 Heat. I think this episode is maybe the first case of a player that I'm talking about being a star or a number one for a team and then transitioning into a role player. But regardless of that, he still doesn't get talked about very much. Now, Rashard Lewis had a 16-year-long career in the NBA, playing for a handful of teams. He was drafted 32nd overall in the second round of the 1998 NBA draft to the Seattle Supersonics, and he played for the Sonics for 9 seasons before going to Orlando in the 2007-2008 season. Then after that, he spent a couple years in Washington and a couple years in Miami before retiring, but he still plays basketball, actually. He, like Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, who I talked about previously, he also plays in the Big Three, and they played for the same team. We love a full circle moment here on Forgotten Dawgs, and what would a video be without one? Now, Rashard Lewis in his rookie season didn't play a lot. He only played 20 games. Rashard necessarily wasn't coming to a team to be the number one, obviously, with getting drafted in the second round, but considering where he got taken, it was incredible value for the Sonics. In his second year, he went from playing 20 games, like I said, to all 82, and averaged 6 more points on a 12% field goal shooting increase. The jump from the 99-2000 season to the 2000-2001 season is where we really saw him start to become a solid player in the NBA. In the 2000-2001 season, he averaged 14.8 points and 6.9 rebounds. He also started to become more of a defensive player as he averaged 1.2 steals a game and 0.6 blocks a game. He also was a guy that didn't foul or turn the ball over much. He was a wing guy that could shoot a little bit, not even a little bit. This season he shot 43% from 3, but he was also a guy that could get to the rim as well. Considering all of that, it's pretty impressive that he didn't turn the ball over very much. Then the next 9 seasons, he continued to play a really amazing prime. Within those 9 seasons, he didn't average lower than 14.1 points, and he was an all-star twice. He was an all-star in the 2004-2005 season with the Supersonics and in the 2008-2009 season with the Magic. Now, that first all-star season was really special. He averaged 20.5 points, had 1.1 steals, 0.9 blocks, 5.5 total rebounds per game, along with shooting 46, 40, and 77% from the respective places. This was his second best season shooting from 3, and it was a very small gap. It was 0.9% difference. But throughout his career, he consistently was a guy that could just knock shots down. His effective field goal percentage was always really good, starting in the 99-2000 season, spanning through the rest of his career. For the majority of that, he hung around the 49 to 54% effective field goal shooting percentage while maintaining a pretty consistent 3-point percentage while increasing his attempts per game. He averaged over 20 points per game 3 times in his career, with 22.4 being his career high for points per game. Now, I've talked a lot about his stats, but his stats led to a lot of really valuable production, especially team result production. That Seattle team that he played on with Ray Allen that didn't necessarily have a lot of talent made the playoffs 3 times. And he played a lot of big minutes, especially I want to look at the 04-05 playoffs, and I want to show you that he played 39 minutes a game and averaged 16.9 points. That was also the farthest that the Supersonics got in the playoffs when he was on that team, and it was largely because of his production. And then he goes to Orlando, and I think that team is really underrated. It has guys like Hedo Turkoglu and obviously Dwight Howard and a young JJ Redick. It sort of reminds me of the Nuggets from last year, how they had 1 or 2 really good guys and then just consistency throughout the rest of their depth chart. That Orlando team made the playoffs 3 times, including the 2008 season where I believe they went to the finals. Yes, they did go to the finals and they lost to the Lakers, but still, it's really impressive for that team to make it that far, and Rashard's production was a huge part of it. I mean, it was his second straight season of playing more than 41 minutes per game in the playoffs and averaging more than 19 points in the playoffs. In that 08-09 season where they made the finals, he also was shooting 39% from 3. But as I continue to look at his basketball reference page, like, he was really a playoff riser. His free throw percentages went up a lot in the playoffs. He had a reasonably consistent field goal percentage in the playoffs. His three-pointers sometimes wavered, but that 08-09 season, that was his best year. But yeah, you look at his stats and like his production increases in the playoffs. That's crucial, and these teams don't go as far without him. Like, obviously, if I'm talking about him, he was a role player, but role players are role players for a reason, and they get recognized for playing their roles for a reason. And then with those Miami teams where he was in the playoffs, but really didn't have to do anything to get there when you have 3 of the best players in the league, his responsibilities went down a lot. I mean, in that 2012-2013 season when the Heat won the championship, he only played 4.3 minutes a game. That second season with the Heat, as I talked about earlier, his responsibility went up. He played over 17 minutes a game, but like when you go from starting on your team to being a role guy off the bench, like, just take your ring. Like, it's practically your off season. Now, I think Rashard Lewis is a player that's going to be unique to all the players that I talk about in these videos. Obviously, I had mentioned it a little bit before, but he had so many seasons where he had such good production for teams while constantly kind of being a number 2. You could say he was one of the original Splash Brothers with Ray Allen on that Seattle team. And his impact and his legacy, while being kind of quiet, continues to live on. But there's no doubt in saying that he consistently was an all-star level player for a lot of contending teams. Like, this is the first video that I've made where I haven't looked at any part of his career and thought like, oh, maybe I shouldn't talk about that because it's not as good as other parts. He was always really good and always really consistent. He just simply doesn't get talked about, and that's okay. There's a lot of people that should be recognized and talked about, but for him to go completely under the radar isn't exactly what he deserves. Now, when looking at his awards and his honors, he competed in the three-point shootout 3 times. Obviously, he was an all-star twice. He was player of the week twice. And this necessarily isn't an award, but he was a chucker. In the 08-09 season, he led the league in three-point field goals and three-point field goal attempts. You don't see a lot of people do that unless they're like Steph or Dame. So it's really impressive to see that he was putting up so many shots, but also making so many of them. And the advanced stats and analytics love him too. He had 2 seasons in the top 20 for win shares. He had 3 seasons in the top 16 for offensive box plus minus, and 4 seasons in the top 20 for offensive rating. Now, the Rashard Lewis archetype, I think, is just what makes him so appealing to me. This is all just my opinion, but I think it's really fun to look back at a player who you don't necessarily see doing these kinds of things. I mean, we see guys like DJ Burns in the March Madness tournament right now who talks about how he watched a lot of Hakeem growing up, but he's just built like Zach Randolph, where there's no guy that you look at Rashard Lewis and think, oh, who is the guy that came before him that really formed his role in the NBA? Like, off the top of my head, I could look really stupid right now, and maybe when I'm editing, I'll put in another player that Rashard Lewis kind of took after. But his archetype is kind of unique to the era that he played in, and I think that's really interesting. Now he's the kind of guy that you want on every team. He's kind of like an Aaron Gordon for today, maybe with a little worse defense, but you see these kind of guys everywhere in the league now. And I think it's cool that he kind of paved the way, sort of under the radar. His nickname was Quiet Man, so I'm assuming he was pretty quiet, and his legacy's pretty quiet. I think he's got a cool vibe. Rashard Lewis, sweet Lou, young fella. He's got a cool vibe. So that's where I'm going to leave off for this video, but I hope you enjoyed. I will see you again sometime soon with another video. Leave a comment, leave a like, subscribe, send me $4 million. I don't care what you do, but I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you have a wonderful day. See ya!